I need to get this out there. My girlfriend and I went on a hike the other day because it was nice out for the following days after the New Year. We live in Michigan, so it was one of those more pleasant, sunny winter days with minimal snow on the ground and dry enough for us to enjoy being outside. However, around 4 p.m., there would be a snowstorm lasting for hours. Typical Michigan weather around this time. There's a trail we like called Inwoods Trails, and there's an area we haven't explored yet and decided that day would be perfect. Although it was more out of impulse. We were like that, but everything always worked out in the end. We've been stuck at work so much lately, and we both had the next 2 days off. The outdoors are something we love and talk about getting that cabin in the woods everyone fantasizes about as young couples. We really didn't have much weight to throw around at the time financially, but Jasmine and I went online and bought some new hiking gear, and I had recently gotten a new SUV. Our jobs are pretty difficult. I work in a warehouse and she's got a lot of medical experience working at the hospital. She honestly works more than me. She would always make it known that I shouldn't worry about stuff like that because she loves me no matter what. Our relationship has been moving forward at a steady and happy pace. We've been together for going on 4 years, and I truly felt that I found the love of my life. We were going to spend the entire day hiking and exploring the unexplored. We've only lived here for a year, so we aren't familiar with everything yet. But we had maps, and I always believed in compasses. Jasmine always gave me shit about my old methods. I barely know how to work Snapchat. I guess I'm just one of those guys. She reminded me that we have good coverage on our phone plans, and we're only going to go a little past the posted trail map. We won't be in any dead zones or anything, she claimed. I nodded, not really believing her, and put the compass in my pocket anyways. We got to the trail parking lot and made our way to the entrance, where there were maps and posts for nature and wildlife services on a large wooden bulletin board. There was another one of these places on the far east end of the trail, and there's a trail snaking off that clearly was made to go further in. It wasn't marked on the maps. We wanted to go in there and make little markings out there for us later. She also wanted to mark it on her GPS. That's a good idea, I thought, and she showed me how to do it for later. We got there around 9 a.m., because we wanted to beat the snow that was going to destroy our happiness at dinner time. There was only one small car in the parking lot.
Oh, hell yeah,
she said, and I smiled. I couldn't agree more. We were going to be all alone, and I had this beautiful day to enjoy with this beautiful girl. I remember the weather exactly. It was 50 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny with minimal clouds and no wind. It truly was a beautiful day. How ironic. We got to the secret trail and went in, pushing small branches aside as we approached the woods that surrounded us. As we walked on, we noticed how quiet everything was and how peaceful this really is.
We gotta find a good spot to smoke,
she said. We were avid weed smokers, and there's just something about smoking a joint in the middle of the woods that hits differently. Agreeing, I looked around, searching for a good spot to rest for a smoke and water break. There was a large tree with a broken branch that was perfect for sitting on. We had coats, pants, and gloves on, so I had to pat my pockets down from my bag.
You should really try concentrates,
she told me. Hey, I can concentrate just fine, I replied, smiling. She laughed and I got a joint rolled. It's funny that I made that joke, because what happened next was me concentrating on the woods around me as the THC took effect. I was scanning the area with joy and bliss, and Jasmine put her head on my shoulder. There was a creeping thought as I looked on. Should I do it now? Once I was done contemplating, I noticed something out of place by a grouping of leaves and sticks. Oddly enough, Jasmine was looking in that direction too, and she raised her arm.
Is that a knife?
She inquired, and I looked over to where she was pointing. That was the first sign that we should have went home and stayed indoors like normal people. I thought at the time someone may have just dropped their knife.
Hey, you know what they say? Finders keepers.
I quoted and walked over to the knife. It was quite the sight to behold. It was stabbed into the ground, like someone stabbed it into the dirt. I pulled it out to further examine it and wipe the dirt away. Having looked like an artifact from ancient times, there were strange detailed symbols etched into the handle made from wood. Some of the carvings looked like worms or snakes, and there were 9 circles that looked like planets. The medium-sized straight blade was rusted, and I ventured that if you were to get cut by this weapon, you would probably get sick from some kind of exposure. The thing looked like something you'd see at a museum. This was my kind of thing. I loved history.
Babe, holy shit, come look at this thing.
I heard a sigh and she walked over.
Cool.
She said, looking unamused.
You guys and your toys. You gonna take that home with us?
I wanted to do some research on this thing. Maybe we had just found a piece of history long forgotten. This made me want to go home right away and look up this trail and see if there was maybe a battle here, or was home to settlers and hunters or something similar. We had just moved out this way only months ago, so we never really looked into this trail. We just found it on a drive one day exploring the town and the surrounding area after we moved in. Taking a long drag, I exhaled.
Yeah, this thing is...
My response was cut off by the sound of a man screaming. Jasmine immediately huddled to me.
Oh my god, is there someone out here?
She asked, looking around frantically.
I don't know. Should we call the police?
I held the knife in my armpit quickly but carefully and pulled my phone out. I had no signal.
I thought you said we won't be in any dead zones.
She reached in her pocket and pulled her phone out, scrolling up and down.
What the hell?
She looked up at me with worried eyes. She didn't have any bars either. She tried calling the police and the call immediately ended. We tried again. Nothing. The man continued to scream somewhere out there in this unexplored part of the trails. There weren't any private property signs, but we were a pretty good distance in. These trails aren't by any homes either. We're out in the sticks.
Maybe we should see if we can find them. If there's someone out there hurt, they need all the help they can get. There's going to be a snowstorm soon.
Her look remained locked in a worried expression.
I don't like this at all.
I silently agreed. Then another cry from the man rang out. We could clearly hear the words, "Help me," and that made the hairs on my neck stand up.
Alright, come on. Just stay close to me, alright? If we find them and they're hurt, I need you to go back to the car where there's a signal, I'm sure, and call the police while I stay behind and wait with them until you arrive with help. It's the only way, I think.
She nodded.
Yeah, I don't think I can live with myself if I let someone die knowing full well I could have helped. Let's go.
We then put the joint out, and the blade was small enough to fit in my side pocket. I had cargo pants on and it was snug in there. Then, once again, headed for the secret trail, but now following a man's cries for help. After some time, we got to a point in the trail where the cries were loud and directly to our left. There was clearly an opening with bushes and vegetation circling the space. Upon further inspection, there was a field behind the opening where branches covered the view slightly. And on the ground in front of us was where the source of the cries came from. It was a man on the ground, covered in blood and horrified. He had lacerations across his arms, face, and chest. He looked like a homeless man, with dirty clothes, scraggly hair, thick gray facial hair, and wide eyes. His skin was dirty and the blood looked fresh. The amount of blood coming from the man made me shiver slightly.
Oh my god!
Jasmine shouted. "Please, you have to help me."
It hurts. It hurts.
The man pleaded and begged for our help relentlessly as he writhed on the ground in agony. To my surprise, Jasmine walked over to the man and knelt down next to him. He grunted and looked up at her.
What happened to you?
She asked him, but he winced in pain before he could say anything else.
Babe, I will stand by him. I will be fine. Just go ahead to the car. I've got some first aid supplies in my bag. I can patch him up until you get back with help.
She was in the medical field, so I felt reassured at the prospect that she could actually help the man from dying. Jasmine was a strong woman with more dedication than I could ever hope to have. I could trust her with everything. The man cried out with tears in his eyes.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
He whimpered. Hesitantly, yet with some ease, I replied, "All right, well, I'm gonna run faster than the wind. I love you," I said.
I love you too.
She smiled weakly. I looked down at the man. "Hang in there, yeah?" He was busy crying in pain, and I turned around to go for a signal and get help. As I turned my body, I began to run out of impulse to quickly get to where this trail started and where the strongest signal would surely be. But I felt the blade in my pocket move with my motions, and it stopped me from advancing. I decided that if I ran now, the blade would fall out or stab me. Remembering the condition it was in, I stopped to quickly put it in my bag. I was just outside the opening, maybe 15 or 20 feet from them. I had the blade in my hand, and it was then where I heard the sounds. Wet and squelching, like someone was squeezing jelly. I did not like that at all, so I instead ran to them. What I saw will not leave my mind for as long as I live. It all occurred in an instant, but it felt like the rest of the world was on pause while the sight before me unfolded. Jasmine was standing up, facing the field, motionless. Her head was jerking around, and those terrible sounds came from that direction. The bag with the medical supplies was discarded to the side, and the man that was once lying on the ground, bleeding and dying, was now standing on both of his legs that had bloody cuts lining up the pants. He had a blank stare on his face, and his eyes looked like they were rolled in the back of his head. Or they were somehow pure white when before they looked to be brown. There is no other way to describe this. But the man's bloody wounds had these long veins slither out of his body and coiled themselves around and in Jasmine. Every limb on the man's body had bloody veins invading my girlfriend like parasites. The cuts and the material of the clothing were shifting from the weight and motion of the sickening veins. Her body would stiffen, and her head was jolting up, left, down, right sporadically. I could see those veins entering her mouth, nose, and eyes. I wanted to scream a wail of fear, confusion, and anger. But instantly, my fight or flight triggered. My body instinctively chose fight. That was the woman I loved. There was no way I was going to let whatever this thing was kill the love of my life. Still holding the blade in my hand, I rushed the damn thing. I bolted for it and raised the knife above my head. It noticed me, just as I was mere feet away, and its head quickly turned to me. I saw the thing's eyes meet the blade, and it shrieked a shrill cry. My adrenaline was pumping so much, and I was moving fast, so I didn't immediately notice the bloody veins retract from Jasmine. I didn't think I could, but with ferocity, I sunk the blade into the now seemingly frightened man's skull, just above his eyes. The impact sent a bolt through my arm, and the man's face drooped as his blood pooled from the stab wound. There was a brief moment as I stared at the man with his mouth hanging open. His skin had these strange small craters, and his face was much longer than before. He didn't have any teeth. There were just gums. Then, all at once, his body became slimy, and balls of sweat or skin bubbled out and popped. The skin was beginning to quite literally melt off of his body. I let go of the blade as the man's entire body dissolved into tiny, root-like veins entering the earth below. "What the hell?" was all I could manage to say, but I had no time to think about what just happened. In a panic, I whirled around to Jasmine, who was now lying on the floor, lifeless. "Shit, baby, talk to me," I pleaded as I felt for a pulse. There was nothing. Her eyes were wide open. I didn't want to believe it, but I know when a person is dead. I shook her a little, knowing it wasn't going to do anything, and felt sick to my stomach. It looked like those things got into her body. What was I supposed to do? I grabbed her face and tried to tell her to please breathe, or I don't know what I was saying, honestly. What would you do? My world was crashing around me. There was something I needed to do, and now, her lifeless body lay still in my arms. Jasmine then gasped loudly and froze, staring up at me. Startled, I recoiled as she was staring at me with tears in her panicked, bloodshot eyes. "Shit, Jasmine, baby, talk to me." I got her to her feet, but in an instant, she pushed me away, then doubled over, vomiting onto the ground. An avalanche of bile, blood, and what I can only assume was the last thing she ate poured onto the ground. She staggered, swaying after the onslaught of puke and gore that came from her. She shook her head and wiped her mouth, then looked at me with a sort of glazed over look. I couldn't tell if it was from the tears or something else. The temperature dropped and I shivered from the combination of that, what I saw, and now this. I shoved all of my negativity aside. I was just so glad she was with me, ignoring that she had just died, or at least it seemed that way. "Jasmine, baby, thank God. Are you okay?" I went to embrace her, and she just remained still.
Yeah, honey, I'm better now.
She replied to me, "Let's get the hell out of here and never come back." I insisted. She nodded, and I looked down at where the man had melted into the earth. The blade was on the ground. It sort of looked like it was in the position in which I had first grabbed it, sunk into the ground as if someone had done it. I thought to myself that I should just leave it there and just never look back, but something told me to retrieve the blade. I told Jasmine that we were getting out of there now, and I let go of her to grab the blade. Walking back to her, I put the knife in my bag's side compartment where you could put drinks and whatnot, then told her to follow me. So I did just that, then grabbed her hand to lead us out of that nightmare. As we walked on, I noticed more and more that Jasmine was twitching slightly. "Are you okay?" I asked, but she only nodded. I was still holding her hand and she let go. She stopped walking entirely. We were only about 10 feet away from the trail exit with the wood bulletin board. I turned around and looked at her, confused. "Jasmine, what's wrong?" Her face was no longer welcoming. Her eyes had visibly sunken in and her skin was pale.
Something is... I feel... I can't...
She shakily spoke.
I need...
She spoke again. "What?"
The blood that will enrich the land.
The voice that came out of my girlfriend no longer carried a soothing tone. It was twisted and distorted. I've never before felt dread until now. Because as she said those words, her mouth opened and those veins spewed out, writhing around, desperate for something to latch onto. Those disgusting, wet sounds from before filled my ears as she stepped forward, and more veins erupted from her arms, shoulders, legs, and chest. They were reaching for me, reaching for the living, for flesh.
Come here. Come with us down below. Witness the legend of our land come to life as we consume the living.
The voice of a truly evil and murderous creature escaped my girlfriend's throat. I was crying now, sobbing uncontrollably and retching in between. My girlfriend was gone. Those veins must have taken her over. I was backing away with shaking legs. The snow was starting to fall and the storm was undoubtedly on its way. Thoughts rushed through my head as I recalled the events that had transpired. I thought about how I was going to ask Jasmine to marry me in those woods. I had the ring in my pocket. It was supposed to be perfect. Now, it all just went straight to hell. No, I cried. No, this is wrong. This is all wrong. I was panicking even more now. I pulled that knife out in a frantic attempt at trying to look like I could defend myself. She screamed in that warbling voice. One of the veins darted towards me and I dodged it, stumbling. I quickly regained my composure while screaming, knife in hand, and just ran to my vehicle. What choice did I have? I heard the sounds of those things trying to reach for me as I ran, but they faded away as I got to the parking lot. Still running, I slowed my pace and went to turn around just to get a peek behind me, expecting to see Jasmine chasing me. I instead was the only person in that parking lot. I stopped and looked to where Jasmine was, but saw nothing. With nothing left to do, I got in my SUV, tossed the knife in the passenger seat, locked the doors, and drove back home. Seeing all of Jasmine's things and our pictures together brings me nothing but sadness and guilt. Guilt because I took the love of my life to a secret trail to ask her hand in marriage, only for her to die a horrifying death. Jasmine, I'm so sorry. It's been 2 days since the incident, and I can't just pretend anymore. I can't pretend that I don't have something to do now. I haven't told anyone what happened. I'm posting my experience here simply because no one would give me the time of day, and believe me, as soon as the word creature leaves my mouth, especially her family, if they want the truth, it will be here. Also, I doubt I'll be returning from what has to be done. I thought back to when I stabbed that man with the mystery blade and he'd completely melted to the ground. Maybe that area we ventured in is cursed and that knife is a part of it. I tried looking things up online, but the only way I know how to put this into words is by telling you, warning you. If you're ever in Michigan, you better hope and pray to whatever God you believe in that you don't come across this. I'm scared. I have heard of some horrible things, but there really are things in this world that you, me, or even the internet can't explain. Don't go to Inwood's trails. Please. I'm looking at the knife now. What the hell is this thing? I've looked on the internet in search of anything related to the knife, to Inwood's trails. I can't even begin to describe in words a way to search the thing that took my girlfriend on Google. So I didn't. I'm on my own here. Maybe you can help. This knife somehow affected that man's tainted and parasite-riddled body, and I ask myself, can I really bring myself to do it? Will I be able to sink that blade into Jasmine's skull? I'll have to make this drive soon. Go to that trail that she's somehow bound to. In my head, at least, it didn't seem like she wanted to leave. Like it didn't want to leave the land it spoke of in that sickening voice that came from the woman I loved's lips. I'm seriously hoping that when I do this task, it will end the cycle that thing seems to have on the living. But then again, what if it doesn't?